she could to protect her brother, even if it meant breaking the law. She wasn't some hardened criminal. She was scared. Michael turned away for a moment, trying to collect himself, but it was too late. The tears were already streaming down his face. He didn't know how to handle it, didn't know how to shift away what he was feeling. His chest ached with empathy and sorrow, and it took everything in him not to break down completely right there in the parking lot. He took a deep breath, wiped his eyes, and turned back to her.
"I'm so sorry, Jada."
He whispered, his voice thick with emotion.
"I'm sorry you've had to go through this."
Jada looked up at him, her tear-filled eyes filled with confusion, like she couldn't believe what was happening. Michael had to make this right. He couldn't erase what she'd done, and couldn't change the fact that she was still in trouble. But he could see now that this wasn't just about the law. This was about understanding, about seeing the person behind the action. He took a deep breath and reached for his radio, my voice barely steady as I called off the backup. This was more than a simple arrest. It was a moment where two lives, two very different paths, crossed in a way neither of them had expected. And standing there, he realized that sometimes the lines between right and wrong aren't as clear as they seem.
"Jada, please listen to me.
Michael said softly.
I'm not going to take you to jail, but I need to understand more about what's going on. Can you tell me more about your brother? Where is he? What's his name?"
She wiped her face, trying to stop her tears, but they kept coming.
His name is Malik. He's 6. He's in the hospital because he has leukemia. He's been there for a while now. I'm the only one who visits him. My mom, she's not really around.
Michael's heart sank deeper. A 6-year-old in the hospital, battling cancer. And Jada, at just 12, carrying the weight of being both sister and caretaker. No wonder she was desperate. No wonder she'd do anything to comfort her brother, even if it meant stealing a simple toy.
"Where's your mom, Jada?"
Michael asked gently, though he could already tell the answer wouldn't be good. She sniffed and looked away.
She's with her boyfriend most of the time. She's never home. She drinks a lot. She hasn't seen Malik in weeks. It's just me and him now.
He didn't know what to say. The anger Michael felt wasn't for Jada. It was for the situation she was in, for the adults who were supposed to protect her and Malik but had failed. She was just a kid, forced to grow up too fast, doing the best she could with what little she had. Michael took a deep breath, trying to figure out the next step. He couldn't just let her walk away, but he couldn't throw her into more trouble either. He needed to find a way to help her without making things worse.
"Okay, Jada. I'm going to take you to see your brother,
He said, making the decision on the spot.
but we need to talk about what's going to happen next. You can't keep doing things like this, even if your heart's in the right place. Do you understand?"
Her eyes widened in surprise.
You're not taking me to jail?
He shook his head.
"No, I'm not. But we're going to figure this out together. I'm going to help you. We'll figure out a way for you to take care of your brother without getting into trouble."
She nodded, fresh tears forming in her eyes. But this time, they weren't just from fear. She was relieved. The hospital wasn't far, just a short drive. As they rode in silence, Michael made a few phone calls. First, to his sergeant, explaining the situation. He knew this wasn't protocol, but sometimes the rules had to bend when there was something more important at stake. Then, he called a social worker he knew from another case, told her about Jada and Malik, about their situation, and asked if she could meet us at the hospital. When they arrived, Jada led the way to Malik's room. He was asleep, his small body looking even smaller in the hospital bed, hooked up to tubes and monitors. The stuffed bear was still clutched tightly in Jada's arms, and he could see her fighting the urge to wake him up, to give him the bear right then and there. Instead, she sat quietly by his bedside, her hand gently brushing his cheek. The love she had for him was obvious, and it hurt to think about the challenges they were facing together, alone. While Jada sat with Malik, Michael waited in the hallway for the social worker. It wasn't long before she arrived, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a calm presence. He filled her in on the details, and she agreed to talk with Jada to see how she could help. When Jada came out of the room, Michael introduced her to the social worker. They talked for a long time, Jada explaining everything, the hospital bills piling up, her mother's absence, the pressure she felt trying to be there for Malik when she didn't know how much longer he had. The social worker listened carefully, her eyes soft with understanding. She promised Jada that she'd do everything she could to help find ways to support Malik in the hospital, looking into programs that could assist Jada financially, and, most importantly, ensuring Jada wouldn't have to handle this all on her own. Over the next few weeks, Michael kept in touch with Jada. He checked in on her and Malik, visited the hospital when he could, and made sure the social worker was following up with the resources she'd promised. He couldn't erase what had happened, but he could make sure Jada knew she wasn't alone anymore. One afternoon, when Michael visited, Jada gave him a shy smile as she greeted him at the hospital entrance.
Malik wants to say thank you.
She said, leading him to his room. Inside, Malik was sitting up, the stuffed bear now a permanent fixture by his side. He grinned up at Michael, his eyes bright despite the tiredness in them.
Thank you for helping my sister,
he said softly. Michael knelt beside him, smiling.
You've got a pretty amazing sister, Malik. She loves you more than anything.
He nodded, squeezing the bear.
I know.
As he stood up to leave, Jada caught his arm.
Thank you.
She whispered, her voice thick with emotion.
You saved us.
Michael shook his own head in turn.
No, Jada, you saved yourselves. I just helped you see that you didn't have to do it alone.
And as he walked out of that hospital room, he knew that Jada and Malik would be okay. They had a long road ahead, but they wouldn't be facing it without support anymore. And in his heart, he felt lighter, knowing he had done more than just uphold the law. Their story had shaken something inside him. A part of him hadn't realized he had gone numb after years on the force. It reminded him why he had signed up for this job in the first place. Not just to uphold the law, but to protect, to serve, to make a difference where it mattered most. A few days later, Michael decided to check in one more time. He hadn't planned on staying long, just enough to see how they were doing. When he arrived, Jada was sitting in the hospital lobby, her eyes lighting up when she saw me.
Hey!
She said, standing up quickly.
Malik's doing better today. They said he might be able to go home soon.
That's great news.
He replied, genuinely relieved. Malik had been through so much, and hearing that he was stable again brought a wave of relief. She strained with the straps of her backpack, the same one she had the day he arrested her.
I've been meaning to tell you.
She started, her voice low.
The social workers have been making sure we are cared for. We can eat real food now. The social worker really is helping us out.
That's amazing, Jada.
Michael said, smiling.
I knew you'd figure things out.
She nodded, her smile small but real.
I'm just so happy they will be able to help with Malik's medical bills now, and I won't have to steal anything again.
Her voice trailed off, but he knew what she meant. He stood there for a moment, letting her words sink in. This girl, who had once been so desperate, was finding her own strength. She was learning how to stand on her own, how to fight for herself and her brother without breaking the law.
You're doing great, Jada.
Michael said, feeling a surge of pride for this almost teenager who had been through more than most adults.
I'm proud of you.
Her eyes glistened for a moment, but she blinked away the tears.
I wouldn't have made it without you,
she admitted quietly. Jada gave him a small smile, and I could see the weight she carried wasn't as crushing as it had been before. She was still standing, and so was Malik. They'd keep standing, together. Before he left, Malik waved at him from his bed, the stuffed bear still tucked under his arm.
Make sure you come visit again soon,
He called out, his voice full of hope. I will, Michael promised, knowing he'd keep that vow. This wasn't just another case anymore. They weren't just a file on my desk or a report in the system. Jada and Malik reminded him that even in the darkest situations, a little kindness and support can make all the difference.